Hello and welcome to the big picture. When the President of the United States of America speaks about India, it is naturally taken very seriously. US President Barack Obama's interview to the PTI from Washington, published in the newspapers today, has resulted in a wave of protests from both the Indian political class as well as the industry. His statements regarding the need for India to go in for fresh economic reforms and his mention of multi-brand FDI in retail has raised the hackles of many in this country. Cries of the US trying to pressure India to adopt certain economic reforms beneficial to the Western powers have been reverberating since yesterday. While his comments about no role for US in the Kashmir dispute has been welcomed, his comments on increased role for India in Afghanistan has caused concern in Pakistan. Today we will discuss all these issues raised by the US President while asking the question, is the US trying to put pressure on India to follow policies which suits it? To discuss this, I have with me today Arundhati Ghosh, former Indian ambassador to the UN, Nilotpal Basu, CPIM Central Committee member, Prof.K.P. Vijayalakshmi of the Center for American Studies in the JNU, and Vinod Sharma, political editor, Hindustan Times. Welcome to all of you. First, let me go to Arundhati Ghosh. You think this kind of reaction which has come in the media from all quarters, is it some kind of an overreaction you think, or you think it is justified that we need to tell the US President only so far, no further?
I think it was totally unnecessary.
Yeah.
It's an interview, presumably at the request of the PTI correspondent, where he was answering questions. The only thing that one could perhaps say that he was judgmental is in his use of the word deteriorating, that the investment climate is deteriorating. That is what I think everybody is saying. But I think I'd like to make a point here, if I might. Somehow, when foreign, especially Western media or leaders or whoever makes a comment, if it is for us, then we are very pleased. If it is against us, we protest. Why don't we see what the facts are? He's got his own country, his own problems.
That is the question, Ms. Ghosh. Was this aimed at his domestic audience mainly because it's an election year, he's going for elections?
Absolutely. That is not in this particular interview, but I think whenever he talks about outsourcing, jobs is very important in any election where the employment rate is not increasing as it should. I mean, this is common sense. But in this particular case, he does talk about jobs. So he has as priority the American audience. But he's conscious that he's talking to PTI.
To an Indian media.
Because what he says about Kashmir and even what he says on the economic side, he's put forward the American point of view. I mean, surely we don't expect him to put forward our point of view.
Let me go to Nilotpal Basu. Nilotpal Basu, is it an overreaction on the part of the Indian political class to whatever the US President says? Do you think we could have just taken it as Arundhati Ghosh says on its face value that he is talking from his point of view, from the American point of view?
I think your opening remarks suggested that US presidents are usually taken seriously here in India. It is perhaps true, but I think if one reads through this statement, one ought not, because it's very clear there's a tone of desperation that was reflected in his observations, because he is desperately trying to send a message to his electorate for the impending elections that he is talking tough. But I think he has made really an ass of himself because he is trying to deflect from the role that US has played over the last couple of decades or so in bringing the global economy to the brink, to the financial meltdown and the subsequent economic recession. But I think we have been also asking for this, because many of the instrumentalities that are being employed, not necessarily by US alone, but the entire international finance capital, are instrumentalities of rating agencies, of corporate media, and all these has been legitimized over the years by the Indian leaders themselves. So I think here is a situation where we have to carefully read the situation, because jobs also is a very big problem, and multi-brand retail is something where impact will not only be on employment in the retail sector, but also on our small producers, both agriculture and in the manufacturing sector. Okay. So therefore, I think we need to evolve a consensus, but I think one need not take President Obama so seriously, because they simply do not have the leverage, the wherewithal to bamboozle us only on the economic front. But when it comes to overall security questions, of course, there are very serious development taking place with changed American geostrategic priorities in Asia Pacific.
Nilotpal will come to the strategic aspect of it. In fact, he has spoken about it also. We'll come to that. Vinod, there is a pattern, all said and done, despite what Arundhati Ghosh has said. The fact is that Hillary Clinton was here some time back. She also spoke of FDI in multi-brand retail. He's also talking about it. There is a certain pattern in the US trying to, force or pressurize India to follow these policies.
You see, this reminds me, there's a sense of deja vu in what I'm seeing. Leave aside for a moment the great hormonal disorder which is there in the Indian media, that we sort of tend to get very alarmist about every single thing. I think that this reminds me of the Americans once telling the Indians that, Pepsi and Coke were the symbols of
US power.
US power. They were the symbols of the United States. So was Enron, once upon a time. And we were reminded about that. I see in this, recently, about 3-4 weeks back, I was reading The Economist, and there it was mentioned that India needs to be given a shock in order to spring into action. Indian government is comatose, policy making is at a standstill. And then I see,
they call the PM
and then I see a great cyber being unleashed through the instrumentalities of Standard & Poor, these rating agencies, which were giving prognosis. They are not effectively downgrading us, but they are telling us that you can be downgraded. And then,
no, in fact,
and then you had this
Standard & Poor downgraded us below Greece and Spain also.
Standard & Poor, and after that there was another rating agency, Moody's. Which came up with the prognosis. And then this Time magazine, which is today known for the covers. There used to be a time when it was known as Time magazine, but now it is known for the covers, the kind of covers it brings out. It published one on our former Prime Minister, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, asleep at the wheels, and where it dwelt on his drinking habits and his eating dietary habits and how many hours in a day he sleeps. And this time you have Dr. Manmohan Singh as underachiever. I remember that both Time and News magazine were embedded with the US forces during the Gulf War, and I don't take them seriously. So I think that this cyber is being generated in order to put the fear of a slowed down economy in the minds of the Indian business and the Indian government, and to some extent the opposition. The opposition, which is, and I don't include the left in this, that is making brave statements today, I think the right-wing opposition, that opposition itself has kowtowed to the Americans in the past, even to the extent that at one point they were willing to commit troops in Iraq. Right. So I think that the American president speaking, and if he's on the phone tomorrow, he's just given an interview today, but if he's on the phone tomorrow with some of these prominent leaders, and excluding Prakash Karath, he won't talk to him because he would be wasting his time if he does that. He knows the policy of the CPM. I think that these people you'd see that they would be following what he desires. You see, the problem there is that the American economy is desperate to dip into the Indian savings. Their own people, their domestic consumption in the United States and larger parts of the West has plummeted badly. And there is a strong possibility of domestic consumption increasing in India. And that is where these people want investments in the pension sector, they want investments in the retail sector because people have the buying capacity and they will go and buy things. So it is not all that simple, but at the same time it is not all that alarmist as well.
It's not alarmist, Vijayalakshmi? You think it's not alarmist, or should India take this some of what he has said, especially on the economic reforms front, as an advice or a suggestion?
I think we've started off totally on a wrong foot. If I may say that, you know, this is political season of the United States. Clearly, he gave it to PTI, and therefore the negotiations between India and the United States have been going on for the past 10 years in a mostly, I think, you know, serious manner and also at all levels. So clearly this position is not new.
It's not new.
Yeah. So to suddenly wake up and say, well, you know, US president is actually saying this to me.
I think
Don't
it is
take
the
it
FDI,
personally, I would say.
The mention of FDI in retail is what seems to have created this kind of
It's
a
like
reaction.
a red flag to...
It's a red herring.
Yeah. It's a red flag to us. But really the
More
issue
accurate,
is...
red herring.
Red herring. But the reality is, I think we should start by understanding that there is a serious and severe debate in the United States, including the media's reporting of both the candidates, Mitt Romney and Obama, who is fighting a re-election. And therefore, his entire stance on outsourcing, on free trade, on his deliverance and deliverables on the job, on, you know, apart from healthcare, what else has he done? Why hasn't he done this with the Congress? The critics from the left in the United States are attacking Obama as much as the people from the Republican Party and the conservatives. So this is an election season. I think we should need to put that in perspective and therefore look at implications of his coming back or not to the Indo-US relations. I think that would make sense. But to react on just FDI retail, it's nothing new. This has been going on, at least, I don't know, deja vu is probably the best I can think of. The second thing is, I think many economists in America have been arguing with the Obama presidency that you haven't done enough about China. So this is not very specifically only about India when you talked about outsourcing.
In fact,
so the Chinese angle has been prominently discussed in the American media vis-a-vis the president as well as his challenger Mitt Romney. And of course, the arguments about why is Mitt Romney suddenly being painted as the pioneer of outsourcing, you know, all those stories about how much money is salted away. This is part of the game. Absolutely. So I think you take that larger view and then look at what he said about India.
No, he has said many other things about India. We will need to, we'll discuss.
Yeah, but I just want to...
If we keep the FDI and retail aside and look at other things, I don't think most people here would have a problem with what he has said there.
Exactly. No, but I just want to add one thing. That is, you know, when you talk about the people in his own, you know, cabinet and his administration, many of them have been earlier in top positions which were outsourcing. Outsourcing was happening in the 90s. It was happening, and in 2000s, it has become, I think, more accelerated. The only difference is, earlier, enough jobs were also created by these companies in the US.
Right.
If it was 2.6 million outside, it was 4.4 million inside.
Right.
Now, there is only 2.7 million outside, and there's a slowing down.
Absolutely.
So inside is lesser. So outsourcing is a serious issue for the American electorate, and therefore the candidates are addressing it. I don't think it's India specific.
Okay, we will discuss the remaining issues. We need to go into the short break now. Please keep watching. We'll be back very soon. Welcome back. We are discussing the interview given by US President Barack Obama to an Indian news agency and the implications of that. Arundhati Ghosh, one aspect is what we have discussed about the US interests and their own problems with their own economy and things like that. But you wanted to make a specific point on something.
Well, 2 points, if I might. One is that a time cover and so forth. There has been a period, it's today a period of adjustment amongst the so-called established powers who are in a very bad condition. Economically, particularly Europe. Vis-a-vis the emerging markets,
right,
who may be not doing as well as they were 3 or 4 years ago, but they are still growing at very respectable rates.
Right.
So there is this whole issue of shift of power, etc., mainly China, as Vijayalakshmi said. The point is there is going to be, this is a part, if you look at it historically, it's a part of reaction to these new
emerging
powers whose cultures are completely different from those of the West. These are not the traditional
Absolutely.
Western. But just one other point
is
that nothing that Mr. Obama has said has not been said in our country by our people, by our press, by our industry, by our economists. So why do we take what a foreigner says?
If a foreigner says, Nilotpal, Basu, is that the problem? A foreigner is saying it, our own people keep saying it all the time, and now when somebody says, a US president says it, we see a red herring in it.
I could not agree more with Ambassador Ghosh, because you see, we are making an ass of ourselves. We have been legitimizing this paradigm, which is now being pushed by countries of the West. Some time back, I was just watching a BBC film called Why the West Has Gone Bust. And there they were saying that whatever be the future of globalization, it will never be a debt-driven capitalism. Now, our think tank and our cheerleaders were actually singing glory to this paradigm, and repetition of this by President Obama, as I said, we were asking for this.
You are asking for it.
And that is what
Nilotpal, 1 minute. See, there are other points which Barack Obama has raised in his interview. One is about the interest of the US in the Indian Ocean. He talks very clearly about it, how they, their future, their economic future depends on the Indian Ocean, and he's talking about their Asia Pacific, their interest in the Asia Pacific, and very interestingly, he says that the look east policy of India and their Asia Pacific interests match. Do you see that as some kind of a warning for India? Do you see it as something or a welcome development?
I think this is a very serious development, because if you look at American establishment literature, November 30th last year in foreign policy, Hillary Clinton outlined what will be the changed geostrategic priorities of United States, and they clearly mentioned that Asia Pacific will be the new theater where they would like to concentrate their resources. And it was very clear that, as Ambassador Ghosh was also pointing out, response to China, they are trying to fish in the troubled waters of South China Sea. And Leo Panetta followed it up saying that in the huge arc between Western Pacific through the Indian Ocean, the whole arc that they are going to have will be about military alliances, where they expect that the military relationship between India and United States will be the linchpin. And therefore, it is very clear, Bay of Bengal, this Bangladesh, Burma, and all this. And it is important for us to really strike an independent posture, not to hang on to the coattails of United States and to become servile subordinate allies.
Professor Vijayalakshmi, do you see what Obama says, that India's look east policy and their Asia Pacific interests, they complement each other? Do you see that as complementing each other?
Well, in a way, yes. And I don't think it's servile. And I fully agree that we should be independent. But being independent to me, I think I would think that, you know, whatever I think is right for me is also being independent. I don't see that if I agree with you on any one point that I'm servile or a sore loser if otherwise. I mean, these are, I think, hyperbolic. My main issue, though, is that, you know, the vigorous maritime strategy that the United States began to talk about doesn't really rest with about India becoming the linchpin in the January 2012 statement. Their entire maritime strategy shifted in 2007. And that was published. I mean, it's all in public domain. And really what they were doing even at that time was to relook and rethink their strategy towards Asia. And they were adapting to new developments and planning for contingencies in these new developments. Well, and that was unveiled in 2007. And clearly from then to now, we have been seeing the developments basically mean what? They mean China's own responses, China's initiatives, and China's actions on the ground. And if that is the case, then I think America would then calculate what is in its interest and which country to go for. And I think the non-Cold War sort of a scenario in which current geopolitical security strategic environment is operating really allows for a great deal more of independence rather than the other way around.
For India?
Yes.
Okay. Arundhati Ghosh, as far as China is concerned, you know, he's spoken about China also. There have been questions about China, how US looks at China and things like that. He is trying to balance that whole thing. He doesn't want, of course, you don't expect him to say that we are using India as a linchpin against China or things like that. But do you see that as part of the US strategy?
To do what?
To have India as a counterbalance to China?
No, I think the US-China relations are much, much closer than the US-India interactions and relations. They are really, really very closely interlinked, interdependent, I would also say. But Vijayalakshmi would know more about that. But what I do want to say is that we have to decide what is in our interest. Today we have really problems with whom? We do not have the kind of problems with the United States. And here I agree with Vijayalakshmi.
Yeah, Vijayalakshmi.
We don't have a problem with the United States, as we do with China. The China-Pakistan relationship is something of...
Vijayalakshmi.
And let me add, ma'am, you know, one of the latest, the very latest, couple of weeks ago, the Chinese Vice Foreign Minister, I think, has made a statement which has come out in all the papers. And his new strategy is to have America and China cooperate on the Asia-Pacific. Yes. And he lists exactly 5 steps that many times Indo-US relations seminars have listed for India-US relations.
Absolutely.
So it's a, you know, combination of things.
Vinod, no, I want to move to the other aspect. India's role in Afghanistan, the way the US is promoting India in Afghanistan, and he has said quite a few things about India's role in Afghanistan. Do you think this will create problems for Pakistan? Do you think Pakistan's reaction to this statement of Obama on India's role in Afghanistan is going to be a problem for Pakistan?
Pakistan traditionally has had the kind of approach towards Afghanistan which is quite similar to our approach vis-a-vis Sri Lanka and Nepal, that in these two countries, the Indian security interest should take precedence over the security interests of any other country. So the Pakistanis say that their security interests should take precedence in Afghanistan over the security interests of any other country, because it is their backyard.
Right.
Now, indeed, geographically it is, but the kind of role the Pakistanis have been playing in Afghanistan and the kind of threat Afghanistan has been posing to India, I think that there is a role available to India, but essentially in reconstruction efforts. If the Americans, before quitting the scene, can make India and Pakistan work together for the reconstruction of Afghanistan rather than working at cross purposes, which is at the root of all problems in this region, then I think that their diplomacy would have succeeded. Otherwise, I would rate Obama's policy as the policy of a fugitive, that he has run away from the scene under domestic pressure or for fear of money, body bags landing in his country. On the ground in Afghanistan, not much has changed. I don't think their security forces are strong enough to take care of their country. The political leadership is acceptable across the country. In fact, Karzai's it doesn't run beyond Kabul. Most people believe, and I think that is the right situation. And most of the warlords are in control of their little fiefs. So it's a country which scares you more than reassures. But at the same time, I think that India must not leave room to anybody else. It should work for the reconstruction of Afghanistan and also be at pace with China insofar as the mineral wealth there is concerned.
Right. Nilotpal, last quick words to you. So do you see the US position about India and Afghanistan is something which can help India, or do you think it will affect India-Pakistan relations further and deteriorate the relations further? Quickly.
You see, what we think is that in Asia and in all these theaters, if anything, US presence has only complicated the situation. I think there are experts on the subject sitting there with you. They are looking at the issues from the government's point of view, from the establishment point of view, but essentially there is a major alienation of the people of many of these countries with the US approach, and therefore I don't know that ultimately what happens, or if India is seen in company with US, how far we will be doing ourselves any bit of benefit in terms of befriending the people.
Okay. Nilotpal, we are completely run out of time. Any discussion on United States will obviously, and especially when there is a left party member in the panel, it's bound to have differences. This differences is what keeps India-US relationships, makes it very interesting. We have completely run out of time. Thanks to all my guests, Nilotpal Basu, Professor Vijayalakshmi, Arundhati Ghosh and Vinod Sharma. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue on the big picture tomorrow at the same time.